In this video, we are going to take a look at problem 9.26 from our book. It says refer to exercise 9.18. In an earlier video, we worked this problem 9.18. And so we determined that it says a hypothesis test is to be performed to decide whether the mean age at diagnosis of all people with early onset dementia is less than 55 years old. So in the previous video, right, we found, right, our alternative hypothesis was mu is less than 55. That makes our null hypothesis mu equals 55. Okay. All right, and it says refer to explain what each of the following would mean. So A is a type 1 error. So just to recap, right, what a type 1 error is, if you haven't watched the video type 1 and type 2 errors, you need to go back and watch that. But just briefly, right, a type 1 error is when we reject a true null hypothesis, okay? And a type 2 error is when we do not reject a false null hypothesis. Remember, as a researcher, right, you want the truth of the matter. And so these would be errors, right? Okay, so a type 1 error on part A, they want to know what would that look like in this situation. All right, so a type 1 error, right, is when the null hypothesis is true. So the truth in this situation that we're looking at, right, is that the mean actually is 55. So that's the truth, right? But when we run this test and do the hypothesis testing, then what we wind up doing is we wind up rejecting the null hypothesis, okay? So that would be a type 1 error. In part B, they want to know what a type 2 error would look like, right? So a type 2 error, right, would be in this situation, right, that mu is not equal to 55, right, but is less than 55. Okay. So in this case, right, this is false. So we have a false H naught, and then we fail to reject. Okay. So that would be a type 2 error. A type or correct decision, right, is the next one, part C. They want to know what a correct decision would look like. And again, there's going to be two types, right? Type 1, right, the first correct decision, right, is going to be when our null hypothesis is true, right? So we have a true null hypothesis. We run through the hypothesis test, and the result is that we do not reject. Right? That's correct because we want the truth, right? The truth, if this is the truth and we do not reject it, well then that is a correct decision. The other correct decision is if we get mu is less than 55, if this is the truth, right, in our hypothesis test. And then we run through the test and we reject the null hypothesis in favor of this hypothesis, then again we have the truth. That is a correct decision that was made. Okay. Okay, part D, they say, now suppose that the results of carrying out the hypothesis test lead to non-rejection of the null hypothesis. So you carry out your test and you do not reject the null hypothesis. It says under that circumstance, right, classify that conclusion by error type or as a correct decision if in fact the mean age at diagnosis of all people with early onset dementia is 55 years old. All right, so in part D, right, what they are saying is the truth, right, is that mu is 55. Okay, that's the truth. And you run your hypothesis test, right, and you do not reject. Okay, they want to know, is that an error? If so, which type is it? Or is it a correct decision? Okay. All right, so here, this is the truth, and you do not reject. If I look, right, that is our null hypothesis is the truth, and we do not reject, well, that's a correct decision. Remember, you want the truth, right? The truth is, in this case, right, we're given that this is true, and so the correct decision would be to do not reject, right, the null hypothesis. All right, in part E, right, they say that the truth, right, is that the mean is actually less than 55, right? All right, so this is the truth. Well, if that's the truth, right, then that means that our H naught is false, right? So that's the situation. Okay, and then what do we end up doing? Here they say you end up not rejecting it, right? So, let me write that inequality sentence bugging me because it's hard to tell if that's just a really messed up looking equals or is it actually a less than. Okay, so they tell us the truth is, right, that the mean is less than 55. That means that our null hypothesis is false, and then we do not reject, right? They tell us that's what ends up happening. You do not reject it. All right, so in that situation, they want to know, is that a type 1 error, type 2 error, or a correct decision? Well, it's not a correct decision, right? Because if this is false, then we would want to reject, right? We want the truth, and the truth is not the null hypothesis, right? Because here it's false, right? It's the opposite, or not correct, right? It's got to be false. So what we ended up doing was not rejecting a false null hypothesis, and that is the very definition of a type 2 error, right? So this is a type 2 error. Okay. All right, so that is it for this example.